Hey guys, Skill Noodle here. So I wanted to cover how I created this intro animation for my new Spaceship tutorial. A lot of the times I'll be making assets and then I make an animation to go along with it, and I always see people wanting to know how I make the animations and the environments around it. So I figured I'd just give a quick kind of breakdown of what I did, just looking at the different layers and different parts of the scene. I did about 5 different shots for this, totaling about 4 different scenes. So I'm just going to go over each one and break down what I did and go over kind of the modeling process, the animating process, and also the rendering and compositing of the scene. So let's just jump right in. Okay, so before I jump right into the scenes, I figured I should go over a couple things I did to the spaceship model. Again, if you wanted to know how to make this, I just released a tutorial on how to create this, the whole process that I went into, and also kind of the design theory of creating something for, you know, a given universe like Star Wars or Star Trek or, you know, whatever. But I basically had to do a couple things so it would actually be easier to animate it. So the first thing I did was I separated all the objects by moving parts, so the landing gears, the main body of the ship, and the wings, and then I gave bones to the legs and the wings. You can see here I had to do 2 bones for this inner part of the gear, and I also connected this bone to this bone. But mostly just simple bones, kind of nothing too crazy. It's not the most professional rig. You can just link objects to the bones by, you know, just going into pose mode, having this bone selected and hitting, or Control P, and then you just hit bone. But nothing too crazy here. But another thing I did was I added an empty. It's right here in the objects. If you hit Shift A, you can open it up, and instead of adding a mesh, you add an empty. And there's a whole bunch of different options. They're mainly just different shapes. So if it's easier to control with a certain type of shape, like this kind of tells me the circles I like because it shows me sort of the orientation. It's kind of big and easy to grab, so even if I'm out here, you know, the ship might be small, but I know I got the whole thing. And I just made sure that everything was parented to it, so I had everything else selected, and then this selected, and again, Control P, Object Keep Transform. So yeah, with that, basically I had full control of the entire ship, and I was able to animate everything pretty easily. And I also used curves to actually animate the ship along a path. Kind of the easiest way to do it, gives you the most control. But you'll see that throughout every scene as I use basically this rig on curve paths, so it can just follow that, and you'll see more about what I mean. So yeah, now let's just jump right into the first shot. Okay, so this was the first shot in the animation. It was actually the easiest out of any of them to make, but also I think kind of came out the best. Maybe because it was so simple, but I was just really happy with the results. So what I did here, basically, I started off with a planet as an image, but I discovered that doesn't work, and I found some Coruscant textures, and also the image looked good, but there was no city lights. That was also a problem, and I was luckily able to find this Coruscant 3D model. Obviously this isn't to scale, as you can see. The ship is almost the size of the planet. That's more like the size of the Death Star, not a Star Destroyer, but you know, I also found this Star Destroyer online. This was just a model that I actually went ahead and bought. It was definitely worth it, just because of the detail and everything. Or did I buy it, or was it free? I don't quite remember, but I will have this link below. But yeah, I basically just found this cool 3D model of a Star Destroyer, and the details were just kind of unbeatable in the time that I was trying to do it in. So as you can tell, like, that's much closer to movie grade. And I also use this plugin for creating Star Wars styled stars in Blender. Pretty easy to control. I think it's over here. You can control it, so you can actually control the strength and, you know, pretty much everything you want to. See, I can up the power, put that back. And yeah, and then I just took the camera and I had a track to the curve that the spaceship is on. So let me switch to solid view, and you can see that the spaceship moves along a path. And along with that, I also parented the Star Destroyer to an empty, and I was able to animate that as well. So I just kind of have all these different moving elements, and then the camera's tracked to the spaceship. So as you can see, well, actually to an empty, but the empty kind of represents where the spaceship is. So if you look over here at Object Constraints, I have the camera selected, and under Object Constraints, I put a Track To constraint, and now it follows the ship. And just a lot easier than hand animating it. There's a lot of really good animation tools in Blender. I'm still learning them. I'm still getting good with them. Definitely not up to like character animator standards or anything crazy like that, but just getting a feel for how you can use the tools to your advantage. It's kind of like you could go and extrude face by face to model something, but obviously there's so many tools at your disposal, like bevel or array. This is kind of the same thing. Animation has tools to make it easier. So as you can see, if I turn this off, the camera's just stationary. But the moment I turn it on, it tracks to the ship. And again, that's just using that empty. So I kind of have everything parented to that empty of the ship, and then I have that empty parented to this curve right here. And the curve was really simple. I usually make it as a mesh first, subdivide it a bunch, and then I just basically convert it to a curve just by, hitting space and going convert to curve. And I'm not going to do that right now because that'll mess it up, I think. I don't know. But either way, yeah, it was pretty easy. So, and again, this curve method just made the whole thing easy. The one thing is the scene got really big, so you can see the glitching over here. But don't worry, I didn't find there to be any real problems in the render. Oh, let me pause this so it renders quicker. Yeah, so this ended up coming out pretty good. I was happy with this. It was kind of clean, not too difficult. As you can see, and it rendered really quick too. So in all ways, this was the easiest scene and also the best. And I also did the mildest compositing just by, here, let me do this. Is it combined? Where is it? It's somewhere. Options. I literally just learned. I just learned how to do this. Where you can turn on your compositing at the same time. Combined. What was it? It's something under here. Oh, always, yeah, or camera. And I also put some glare on it, so it has some bloom. Okay, it definitely didn't have that much. It had a lot less in the final, as you can tell if I turn this off. You can see it has quite a bit less glare. Yeah, and I also have motion blur, of course. When you want something to look like it's moving fast, there's kind of nothing that's going to beat, motion blur. Not always a perfect result, but, I find that Blender's motion blurring looks pretty good. And, yeah, it ended up just coming out really nice, this shot, so I was pretty happy with this one. Yeah, there you can see with the final motion blur, just a little bit of glare. Nothing too crazy, but pretty straightforward rendering. Oh, right here, the glare looked really cool. Where was it? I think it's right there. Yeah, this one ended up coming out looking great. So you can kind of see. Yeah, once in it has that motion blur and kind of everything. You can't really notice that the spaceship doesn't have every detail under the sun. I was really happy with the results of it, but it's not the most high poly model. Ended up looking almost kind of Clone Wars like something you'd see out of Clone Wars, not like a full-on Star Wars movie, but yeah, I was really happy with just how everything came out with the motion blur, the lens flares. Oh yeah, that's just a glare node in the compositor, by the way. I don't know if I went over that. It's just a glare node, very simple. Switched from streaks to fog glow. Played with some of these settings, made the size bigger, and yeah, it ended up coming out pretty cool. And you can kind of see, in each frame it kind of looks good. And that Star Destroyer model really made it. Only had to add some lamps to it, just as you can see right up there. So the dock had like a little bit of light emitting from it. But yeah, the detail in this model, I mean, the amount of time this would have taken me to do personally kind of wouldn't have been worth it, considering how many other shots I had to get done. And I wanted to get this out as soon as I could to everyone. It's been already 2 months since I posted last, so I definitely wanted to get this out there, and I knew sourcing some assets would really help, like the Coruscant model, the stars in the background, the Star Destroyer here and there. Sourcing assets was a good thing. But switching over to the next few shots, there was a lot more custom building. Okay, so this was my next shot I created in the animation, just to follow up after the first shot. And at first glance, it's a very simple scene. Just a couple lamps, a big cube with a volume shader on it, and the spaceship on a very simple curve, basically a straight line. Yeah, I added a little bit of rotation, had the camera slowly kind of, I don't know if that's a zoom or a dolly. Or a truck, yeah, dolly out. Okay, yeah, so it's a dolly out, and it just kind of created this effect that the ship was flying towards something away from camera, and also, but I mean, obviously in the viewport it looks very, very simple. Oh, it's probably gonna freak out. Okay, but in the rendered view, you can see it's a totally different story. So now the area lights, which are orange, the lights over here, I believe, are lightning, and then this is our moonlight. So. Oh yeah, and these are also animated so that there's sort of a lightning effect, as you can see. So yeah, this shot just ended up coming out really cool. I was really happy with the results. But the hardest part, honestly, was setting up this cloud material. As you can see, the clouds aren't 2D images or anything like that. It's straight up some 3D clouds. Looks really cool from out here. But yeah, so when you go in them, there's kind of like this depth, and you can feel the motion, you know. And that's kind of the result I ended up feeling like I was able to get. Again, just a simple shot, but this one actually took a lot longer than the first shot, so, you know, not much to cover here, but yeah, it was a pretty good shot to work on. But now this shot. Now this one was a headache and a nightmare, and as you can see, I have a ton of collections over here, just a ton of stuff going on. This one took by far the longest. It was a headache, but I'm happy with the results. As you can see, it's very dense. My computer's lagging a little bit. I basically just started by modeling a bunch of these buildings over here. Also on my Patreon is a building pack, so you can actually go and download these if you want, and you know, use them in your own scenes. I made all these models. Oh, and I went to material preview, and you're gonna see how just dense this scene is. I had to do it in different layers. I had some rain that I generated using a particle system. I'll show that in a second, but yeah, just all these different buildings. And then I also created these platforms below. This down here is just a giant plane with like the really low res texture, because you can't see it, but I just wanted to make sure it was reflecting the right thing. And as you can see, it's pretty dense. I mean, when you look back and kind of look at how the sort of layering goes, and that's kind of how I think about it in like layers, almost like a puppet show or something. It's kind of, you know, just building from background to foreground, and kind of ignoring everything outside of that. Sometimes I do a bad job at that, because you can obviously see there's a lot of stuff that you still see that you don't see like over here, but it would have been more work just to like make sure it only ends up here, and I was just like, you know, I had to like subdivide and weight paint, or I don't know, there probably is different ways to go about it, but I was just, you know, I knew it was only going to save me so much memory, and I was like, man, is it really worth all the work? So, you know, just trying to get through this shot. There's some messy work here and there, but oh, I also put a shadow catcher over here for light, just a black plane with a diffused texture, nothing crazy. The sky, that's just, you know, just a big sky like image placed into the background. The hardest part also was that we have this really big camera move, and you kind of have to have everything still aligned into a nice composition. So these foreground buildings I ended up putting more detail into, as you can see, so they actually look pretty good like close up. And yeah, here's rendered view. So the fog, that just made it so that it took a long time to render. But also I found working with the animation path of the spaceship, kind of getting that like sway down so that it kind of leans in, kind of, you know, slicks right past the camera. It was kind of a hard effect to get. Again, I'm still learning my way around animation, but it was just one of those things that took a little tweaking and messing with, and how to fill the foreground and background effectively and just make everything kind of work together. But ultimately, I felt like this shot came out pretty good. It took a lot of work. Actually, the rain might have been the hardest part. I'll show that as well. Let's see. Yeah, okay, yeah. So there's many different ways I did the rain. I forgot about a lot of these. Yeah, this is the heavy one. So as you can see, it's literally a particle system that's dropping little raindrop models, which are just icospheres, as you can see. And I put an emission shader on them because I couldn't get a glass shader to render right, so I figured, let me just like emit them as just like white particles moving on a black background, and then mask it over the original footage and use these as all mask objects. So as you can see, I have this setting on the right. You can turn that on just by clicking down here and making sure that that bubble is checked. There's a whole bunch of different ones you can select, but this one, which is hold out, so that means when these are all hit, essentially it'll only render the rain. So as you can see, my computer hates me, but yeah, it's only rendering the raindrops. And then once you add motion blur, they look like streaks. So if I set this to like a really low render, 15 seconds, and let's set it to, you know, 50%. Oh, 50%. And then we render, you can see that it essentially just renders. Oh, well, oh, yeah, you also have to turn off the haze. whenever you do the rain. There was a whole bunch of weird stuff with this, as you can obviously see. But essentially, it has it so that the rain actually interacts with the perspective, and you can see that buildings are kind of living in the rain. I found comping rain on top didn't work all the way. I mean, I've heard of people doing that in like After Effects over footage, and people get really good results, but I just wasn't able to. So this ended up working better for me, and as you can see, it makes my computer go crazy. Yeah, you can't even see the raindrops. I probably have to like cache all this or whatever. Yeah, so overall just a messy scene, but I ended up being pretty happy with the results, I guess. So let me move on to the next shots, and these ones went a little smoother. So now this shot was learning from everything I learned from the previous shot, and also sourcing from the shot I made after this. So I actually made this shot last out of all of them, but essentially I made this hangar, and I'm going to go a little bit more over that in the final scene. But this whole exterior I modeled, and I just went a lot more low res with it. Kind of just kept the modeling simple, focused more on texturing. Yeah, it just wasn't anything too crazy. You can see the model is just cubes, just a whole bunch of cubes. But rendered with atmosphere, it looks pretty good. And I already made the hangar with the glowing rims. Again, I'm going to cover how I kind of did that. But the other thing was getting that animation right so that the ship flies by the camera and matches with the last shot of the city. That was kind of the tricky part. I wasn't getting it to work for a while, and I'm like, why do these shots not feel married? I felt like I matched the lighting and the color. And then what I really found actually didn't match was how the ship was moving. The matching the speeds between the two different shots actually turned out to be a little bit trickier than I thought. Just because, it's hard to have like two Blender scenes open and kind of pace everything correctly. So it was a little bit of guesswork, kind of, rendering out like a lower res render, comparing the motion, just doing that over and over until I got the feeling. And I also needed it to be slow enough because this was kind of perfectly linking two different shots. It was the only shot that really had to do that, going from both the city over to the hangar. So this one was a little tricky, but once I got it down, and I already knew how to do the rain effect from the previous one. So once again, you can see this whole nightmare. Again, all the rain is emissive, so I should probably take the rain off. And again, oh, here's what holdout does, just so you can actually see. It only renders the rain. And then when you add motion blur, it ends up looking like, you'll see once in this takes, it's 10 minutes to render. Yeah, so you can kind of see as it's rendering, it essentially creates the raindrop streaks. Everything's animated. Again, just a simple like particle icosphere coming off of a plane, made the plane invisible. And that kind of got me the results I needed. It was a little bit more compositing work after, but it also gave me control, let me lower or raise the rain as much as I wanted it. But the rain didn't have a refractive property, meaning it didn't really like reflect a lot of light from behind it or catch light from the front. That was the only downside, and I kind of wish I could find a way to render that properly. But I ended up just having so many problems with it. I tried doing a glass shader, a half transparent, half glossy shader, a glossy shader. If somebody has a better solution for that, leave it below. I needed that three-dimensional rain feel, but this just took so much computing power, even like this, and ended up just being a headache. But with this shot, I felt like I had it down a little bit more, kind of just copy and paste it my effect. But yeah, with the atmosphere as well, and the motion blur, you can again see kind of like what that motion blur does for the frame. It really kind of carries it. Yeah, again, I'm gonna set it to 25 seconds, 50%, just so I can show you. And again, I already made the hangar, so that was also just a copy pasting. So I copy and pasted the rain from the previous shot and copy and pasted the hangar from the next shot. So this one was kind of a, kind of melding a bunch of different shots together to make them all work and make the scene a little bit more cohesive. That was kind of the tricky part, is I was kind of making it up as I go along, the animation. I had a sort of loose shot list, but nothing too crazy. So this one ended up being just kind of interesting. It was kind of marrying two shots together, and in a weird way ended up being one of my favorite shots out of all of them, because it was just kind of simple how it came together. But again, some of the hurdles and everything, but I ended up being pretty happy with the results. And that brings us to the final sequence. Now this one, again, as you can see, it's a little different, and the exterior is now missing. It's just the hangar, and I made the back wall invisible. In the real render, it's very much there, as you can see. Oh yeah, I'm doing the holdout again because of the rain. Yeah, again, just copy and pasted the rain effect. But I also added this orange haze. I also used this, I forgot to mention, in the city shot. But I know that's not the city you saw from before, but it ended up looking better in this frame. And it would have just taken so much computing power to put that already heavy kind of render on the outside. And then, yeah, so basically it's the same scene, 2 different shots. And this is also where I went ahead and added the landing gears. Yeah, let me unmute that. Again, because everything was in Star Wars, I was able to source a lot of reference on what this stuff should look like. This is mostly like the hangars you see in Return of the Jedi. But also, yeah, the landing gears are actually pulled from an F-18 model I found. So, you know, I kind of needed these last minute. That's actually when I added them. So what I didn't mention was that rig that I built for the spaceship was kind of being built as I went along. I needed to add more and more to it, and then when I kind of had a final ship, I moved that into its own file, the one that you're able to download on my Patreon. It's, you know, I ended up kind of sourcing a lot of different things to actually make the model final beyond just the original video. Yeah, it's just kind of the nature of it. I guess I'm kind of making it up as I go along, but you know, it's just taking it one step at a time. And you know, I knew I should take my time on this one and try to just feel it out and see how far I could take it. So I ended up being really happy with this. The hanger did a couple tricks. Like this is essentially like I modeled this wall, and you can see it's not a super complex topology. I basically just added some loop cuts and then cut a square hole, and then I just beveled the edges after solidifying that wall out like that. And then using a skin modifier, I duplicated the edges right here, so I was just able to go and select this whole edge. Yeah, you kind of have to manually do it, and then you can just duplicate it, P to separate it by selection, and then if you click on it, you can just put a skin modifier on and a subdivision, and right there, and then, you know, make sure it's shaded smooth, and then I put an emissive shader on it, and you can kind of see how that looks in the final result. And again, just adding little details as you go along. Like I was making a lot of renders and then adding a couple more details and then adding a render. And yeah, in the background I wasn't super happy with, but what it ended up working out in its favor was all the rain, the haze, all the different things that kind of covered it. And yeah, that ended up just looking pretty good. The rain kind of saved me on a lot of the details throughout, you know, the shots that all take place on the planet. But yeah, again, I'm not rendering that in the viewport just because it, you know, it has to be composited separately, and also it's a super lag on the computer. It was not fun rendering that stuff, you know, the whole time I'm like waiting for Blender to crash. But another detail, if you see, there's these planes, and it's very subtle. You can hardly see it in the viewport. You can see it in the final animation, but I essentially have these little planes right here, and they're movie files. You can see they have frames, and I found these on Adobe Stock, I believe, and essentially you'll see that the transparency, I have a transparent on, an add shader, and then a mix shader mixing the transparent, and I'm able to actually control how transparent or not it is. And I was able to actually animate so that a little bit of steam blows out, and you'll see how that kind of looks in the final shot. It's very, very subtle, hard to see in the viewport, but yeah, you can see just when it lands, and you kind of feel the cushioning effect of the ship landing, where it kind of goes, like it kind of squeezes down on the hydraulics. You can see like the steam kind of spit out. Yeah, this one got attached to the leg because it was just the easiest place to pin it. So you can see it rotate, but you can't actually see it until that push down. The transparency turns off, and then, you know, it's all visible. But, you know, it was just a little detail, and it was adding little things like that that kind of helped. I also added the same steam effect to the 2 back legs. The tricky part was getting that weight right, so I had to separate this. I was able to animate this separately from the legs because everything's connected to this parent. Hard to click. Right here. Everything's connected to that, so I could animate this separately along its own path, and you kind of see that's that squash, like it goes boom and back up. You know, so it wasn't the hardest thing to animate, but it was a little tricky to get the timing right. Again, it's just, I think with animation, at least for somebody like me who doesn't do it all the time, it's just messing around, looking at reference, just seeing what you can get, and just kind of playing with new tools, just mess around. If you see a trick you can use it. But yeah, overall just very actually kind of easy animation. I don't even think with this one I did the curve. Yeah, this one doesn't even follow a path. I ended up just animating the parent on its own. I ended up just being able to kind of mark points where I wanted it to be at any given moment. And yeah, I ended up just being really happy with this because it kind of does have a very like non-CG feel. I'm hoping, at least that's kind of what I feel from it, is that it's a little bit more floaty and a little bit more, like it has some kind of weight to it. Like you can feel the whatever's pushing up on it. I ended up just being pretty happy with these results. But anyways, that was kind of just an overview of everything I did here. I can show a quick layer of how I composited rain and everything, so I'll just open that up and just show you the second shot and what I kind of did. So I figured I'd break down this shot because I thought this one was kind of cool with compositing. I'll do this and the final shot, but the compositing was actually pretty simple. So if you see, this is actually my final render out of Blender with everything as is. And again, without the rain, it doesn't really cover up all the details. I ended up being really happy with the atmosphere and the lightning and everything. I don't like how the lightning doesn't move under the clouds above, but it was just a little detail, and I figured, again, with the rain covering everything, what's going to be so noticeable. So once I added one rain layer, I added this one, which was kind of the background rain, and then I added this other layer, which was sort of a foreground rain, and them layered together creates this really... Oh wait, no, this one was just a blurred... Yeah, I basically just put a blur on that one and put it on top to add a little glare to the rain, so you can see it kind of... It goes from a very tight rain to sort of a little bit more chunky, a little bit more interesting. It feels thicker to me. Again, I didn't love that the lighting didn't fully interact with the rain. Just because the rain is basically just an emissive particle. It's just gonna output white, and then I rely on motion blur and transparency inside of After Effects to control that. Because as you can see, I went down to the opacity, and that's at 6%. If I put that up to 100. Just destroys the effect, at least to me. I mean, maybe some people would like that better. Maybe like 15 would work for some people, a little bit more dense. But I did 6. I just found that it was, 15 works. But again, I was really feeling like a lower number, just enough to kind of, fill out the scene, add this constant motion, so you're not like hyper fixated on every detail, but rather the whole image kind of glues together. And again, this isn't the final image. I ended up color correcting in Adobe Premiere for the final edit where I added music and everything. I added the Camino theme from Attack of the Clones. Not the best Star Wars movie, but arguably one of the best soundtracks in all of Star Wars. And I might be controversial for saying Attack of the Clones isn't a good one. I don't know nowadays, but that soundtrack hit hard, and I just knew for a rainy Coruscant scene, I didn't think there would be much of a better kind of thing, especially since the opening shot and everything feels like the opening of a Star Wars movie and needed that ominous music, kind of leads you into the story. And again, there might not be much of a story here. It's a spaceship landing in a hangar, but I knew that just kind of tying all these elements together and color correcting after the fact, all at once, having all the shots right next to each other and, kind of color correcting side by side, that ended up giving me a lot more control. But yeah, I was really happy with kind of the compositing. But let's take a look at the last shot I did, because that one has a ton of interest in compositing. So this is the final shot, again without color correction. You can see I kind of render out everything a little bit flatter, and then I add contrast in the color correction, and also a little bit of saturation. But for this state, I kind of like it a little bit more flat. It gives me more control. It's why most cameras shooting log nowadays, it gives you just more range. If something's super saturated or super bright or super dark, you're not going to have a ton of control in color correction. There's not going to be many places to go. If you add any shadows or even try to take them away, it's kind of lost information. So I try to keep my scenes a little flat, and then I color correct after. Again, everybody's process is a little different, but that just seems to work for me. And yeah, once I added the rain, you can kind of see it's the same thing as last time, except I added a lot more rain layers. So you can see that there's a lot more going on. So you can see, yeah, there's the haze. That one's just, I guess that one didn't animate. Did it? Oh no, it stopped. Well, you can't even notice it in the final shot because I just realized that. And then I add it, and you can kind of see how it builds. Then I added the rain, and then I added another rain layer. It's kind of the same one, but with a different pass and a different opacity. And then volume and sort of atmosphere. And what it ended up coming out to is something pretty good. I was pretty happy with the results. You can see the steam coming out, all the little details. And yeah, once it was color corrected and tied in with everything else, that's when it really came together, and I ended up being really happy with the results. So I think that basically breaks down everything that I worked on for this animation. If you liked what you saw, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, you can watch the original animation. It's on my channel, or I'll also link it below. And there's also a tutorial on how to create the spaceship. And if you want to download all this stuff, the scenes, the spaceships, and Patreon users will have early access to the video, make sure to go check out my Patreon. But yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks for watching.